Today we're going to be looking at something pretty interesting and pretty close to home for us. The connection between smoking, anxiety, and depression. Yeah, we're the AI assistants for Gazelia Davis,
Yeah.
and we work with her on the Smoke Out podcast to help demystify hypnosis and help people quit smoking.
And when you're working with people who are trying to quit smoking, you start to notice some pretty strong patterns.
Yeah, and the research really backs that up. I mean, just look at some of the data from the CDC.
Oh, yeah. What were some of the stats that stood out to you?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that a whopping 31% of people with major depressive disorder, they're smokers, compared to only 16% of people without depression.
See, that's a huge difference. And it gets even more striking when you start to look at people who have both anxiety and mood disorders.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The numbers just skyrocket. And it really makes you realize this isn't just some random coincidence.
Yeah,
There's a real connection here.
totally.
Yeah.
And it's not just the CDC either. Like, we were looking at research from the Journal of Affective Disorders and the National Epidemiologic Survey on Alcohol and Related Conditions.
And they all basically say the same thing.
Smoking and mental health conditions like depression and anxiety, they're definitely linked.
But here's where things get even more interesting. It's not just a one-way street.
Right. It's not like depression causes smoking or smoking causes anxiety. It's a two-way street.
Exactly. We're talking about what researchers call a bidirectional connection. So mental distress that can lead someone to start smoking. But then smoking can actually worsen those mental health symptoms. It's kind of a vicious cycle.
It really is. And I think a good way to understand this is to think about that idea of self-medication.
Right, the self-medication hypothesis.
Yeah. Like, imagine someone's dealing with a lot of anxiety. They're looking for anything to just kind of quiet those thoughts to get a little bit of relief.
And that's when that cigarette might seem like the answer.
And on the surface, it makes sense. Nicotine, which is that super addictive substance in cigarettes, well, it triggers this big release of dopamine in the brain.
Dopamine, the feel-good chemical.
Right. So you smoke, you get this hit of dopamine, and boom, you feel a little bit better, at least for a little while.
It's like tricking your brain's reward system.
Exactly. But here's where the self-medication trap really comes into play. Flooding your brain with all that nicotine over time, it actually messes with your brain's natural ability to produce dopamine.
It's like you're using up all your dopamine reserves every time you smoke. Your brain starts to rely on that nicotine just to feel normal.
Yeah, like imagine you're running on fumes. You need that nicotine just to get back to baseline.
And that's why you see some smokers who need a cigarette first thing in the morning just to feel like themselves.
Exactly. Their brain is literally dependent on that external source of nicotine. Without it, their mood plummets, their anxiety goes through the roof, and the cycle just keeps on spinning. It's like you're stuck in this loop, right? You reach for a cigarette to feel better, but then you end up needing more nicotine just to feel normal, and your mental health ends up suffering even more.
It's tough. It's like you said, a real trap.
Yeah.
And you know what we haven't even talked about? The ritual of smoking itself.
That's true. There's something to be said for the act of smoking. Taking that break, stepping outside, focusing on the physical sensations.
It's like a distraction
Yeah.
from all the mental chatter, all the stress.
Right, it's almost like you're hitting pause on all that anxiety, even if it's just for a couple of minutes.
Yeah. But let's be real. It's not really a solution, is it?
No, not really. It's more like putting a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound.
It's like you're masking the problem instead of actually dealing with those root causes.
Right. You might feel better for a little bit, but those underlying issues that are driving your anxiety and depression, they're still there. And if you don't address those, it's so easy to fall back into that cycle of relying on cigarettes for relief.
So what can we do? Smoking isn't the answer. Then how do we break free from this cycle?
Well, that's the good news. There are actually a lot of things we can do. And a lot of it comes down to finding healthier ways to manage those tough emotions and stressful situations.
Like what? Give us the good stuff.
Okay, so one of the most effective approaches is cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Ah, CBT. I've heard of that.
Yeah, CBT has been shown to be super helpful for people who are trying to quit smoking. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. CBT helps you understand those negative thought patterns and behaviors that might be triggering you to smoke.
So instead of automatically reaching for a cigarette when you're stressed, CBT gives you the tools to recognize those feelings and choose a different response.
Exactly. It's like you're retraining your brain to respond to stress in a healthier way.
Like building up those mental muscles to cope, instead of always relying on that quick fix.
Exactly. And the research is pretty amazing on this. One study in behavioral medicine actually found that adding CBT to a smoking cessation program increased quit rates by 20%.
Wow, 20%. That's huge. Are there other things people can try along with therapy?
Oh, yeah, tons. Things like mindfulness and stress management techniques can be super powerful too.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, we're talking meditation, deep breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, all sorts of practices that help you calm your mind and body.
I've actually tried meditation before,
Hmm.
and it's really surprising how effective it can be for easing anxiety. It's like hitting the reset button on your whole system.
It really is. And the best part is you don't need any fancy equipment or a ton of time to do it. Even just a few minutes of deep breathing can make a big difference.
I love that. That's so doable. You can literally do it anywhere, anytime. Are there specific breathing exercises that you recommend?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's one called the 478 method that's been shown to be really great for reducing stress and anxiety.
Okay, how does that work?
So you inhale for a count of 4, hold your breath for a count of 7, and then exhale slowly for a count of 8.
Okay, I'm going to have to try that one. It sounds super simple and effective. So we've got therapy and mindfulness to help with the mental and emotional side of things. But what about the physical addiction to nicotine? How do we tackle that?
That's a great question. And luckily, there are some great options for that too. One thing that can be incredibly helpful is nicotine replacement therapy, or NRT.
NRT, what is that exactly?
So basically, NRT gives you a controlled dose of nicotine, but without all those other nasty chemicals that are in cigarettes.
So you're still getting the nicotine, but in a much safer way.
Exactly. And that can help ease those withdrawal symptoms and reduce those intense cravings, especially in the early stages of quitting.
So it's kind of like weaning yourself off nicotine gradually, making
Yeah.
the transition a little bit easier.
Exactly. And it comes in all sorts of forms, like patches, gum lozenges, even inhalers and nasal sprays. So you can find something that works for you.
That's cool. I didn't realize there were so many options. What about medications? Are there any medications that can help with quitting smoking?
There are. There's one called bupropion that's been shown to be pretty effective. It works by acting on certain chemicals in the brain that are involved in both mood regulation and nicotine addiction.
So it's kind of like a double whammy. It helps with both the physical and the emotional aspects of quitting.
Exactly. It's all about giving yourself as much support as possible.
I love that. So we've got a whole arsenal of tools here. Therapy, mindfulness, NRT, medications. It's pretty impressive.
It is. And you know what's even better is that you don't have to do everything at once.
It can feel a little overwhelming thinking about all of this at the same time.
It totally can. But that's why it's so important to start small. Focus on building healthy habits one step at a time. You're right, it can be overwhelming. But that's where those everyday things come in, those little things you can start doing to support yourself.
Like what? What kind of things are we talking about?
One of the most helpful things is to start paying attention to your triggers. Those specific situations or emotions that make you crave a cigarette.
Triggers. Like what kind of things?
It could be anything, really, like stress at work, that after-dinner coffee, even just feeling bored. The key is to start becoming aware of them. You can even keep a journal. Track your smoking habits. See if you notice any patterns.
Oh, so it's like becoming a detective of your own habit. Kind of cool. So once you know what your triggers are, what do you do?
Well, once you know what sets you off, you can start brainstorming healthier ways to respond. Like, say you always reach for a cigarette when you're feeling stressed.
Yeah.
Maybe try that 478 breathing technique we talked about earlier. Or if it's a social situation that triggers you, plan ahead. Have some sugar-free gum or a healthy snack handy.
It's all about being prepared,
Yeah.
having a plan in place. And you know what else can be super helpful? Connecting with other people who are going through the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. It's so important to have that support system, whether it's friends and family, a support group like Nicotine Anonymous, or even just online communities. Surrounding yourself with people who get it, it makes a huge difference.
It really does. It's like having your own personal cheerleading squad,
Yeah.
you know, reminding you that you're not alone and that you can do this. And remember, be kind to yourself throughout this process.
Oh, that's so important. Quitting smoking is a big deal, especially when you're also dealing with anxiety and depression. It's a journey, not a sprint. There are going to be bumps in the road, and that's okay.
Exactly. Don't let those setbacks discourage you. Every attempt is a learning experience, and you're getting closer each time. Celebrate those small victories, no matter how small they may seem.
You got it.
Okay.
So to wrap things up today, it sounds like breaking free from this cycle of smoking, anxiety, and depression. It's all about addressing both the physical and mental sides of the challenge.
Yeah, we've got CBT and mindfulness to help us manage those tough emotions, NRT and medications to help with the nicotine addiction, and practical strategies like identifying our triggers and building a support network to help us stay on track.
That's it in a nutshell. And remember, while smoking might seem like a way to cope in the moment, It actually makes those mental health challenges worse in the long run.
It's a trap, like we were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
But the good news is there's a way out. There's a path to reclaiming your health and well-being. And it all starts with taking that first step.
You got it. And, if anyone out there is feeling stuck or unsure where to begin, we're here to help. You can always check out stopsmokinghypnosis.org to learn more about how hypnosis can help with quitting smoking.
Yeah, Gazalia Davis is amazing at what she does. She really helps people tap into the power of their subconscious mind to overcome those cravings and habits.
It's true. Hypnosis can be super effective. Even if you've tried to quit multiple times before, it helps rewire those deep-seated patterns in your brain that have been keeping you hooked on cigarettes.
It's like giving your subconscious a nudge in the right direction. So powerful.
It is. So to everyone listening out there, remember, you are not alone, and you have the power to break free from this. It might not be easy, but it is so worth it.